Geopolitical tensions in the Middle East have escalated sharply, and the Strait of Hormuz, one of the world's most critical energy choke points, is now effectively shut to much of commercial shipping. So, what does that mean for global freight markets? From crude tanker rates potentially pushing toward record highs to dry bulk facing a mix of disrupted cargo flows and longer shipping routes, we're starting to see global trade patterns shift in real time. To unpack the implications across both tanker and dry bulk segments, I'm joined by Tom Beney, VP of Ocean Freight at StoneX. Welcome back, Tom.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
I'm sure you've been very busy these last few days, so I'm going to get right to it. Let's start with tankers. How meaningful is the drop in traffic through the Strait of Hormuz, and what's that doing to crude freight rates?
So effectively now we have almost a quasi closure of the Straits of Hormuz. Um, and what that means is that no ships today are, unless they are Iranian controlled ships, are attempting to pass the Straits of Hormuz. Now, that means that we have a huge amount of ships trapped on the west side in the Persian Gulf, and we have a lot of ships waiting on the east side for further clarification. And effectively, what that means is that 20% of global crude comes through those straits out to the importing markets, mainly in Asia, but also in Europe and even in into the Americas. So um, we have a large impact on the flow of crude. In fact, about 38% of seaborne crude actually comes through that strait. So not total crude traded, but seaborne crude. And so we need to think about where is that crude now going to come from, because we will have some impacts, obviously, in terms of opening of that Straits of Hormuz at some point, but that's going to take some time because we need a couple of things to occur here. Firstly, we need the marine insurance companies to say we're okay with it. We've evaluated the risk, and we know now what to charge you for going in and out of the Straits of Hormuz from an extra insurance in a war risk zone. It's
Hmm.
now classified as a war risk zone.
Yeah.
Um, the second thing is we need owners to agree to go there, because obviously they have very, very expensive piece of hardware. Most of the owners, the ship owners in the world, privately owned, and therefore, um, there's a large amount of capital tied up for instance, a VLCC, a 5-year-old VLCC, is probably worth in excess of $150 million today. So we have a large investment, and owners are questioning whether or not that they should even go there. Um, and uh, and then thirdly, I think we need the naval convoys, which we've seen in the past, to start again. So in previous situations, we've had the U.S. Navy and other navies around the world acting as protective convoys as the ships come in and out of the Straits of Hormuz. So we need a number of things to happen for the ships and to start moving in and out. We have a lot of ships trapped in in the west side in the Persian Gulf, and we want to get those ships out, and we want to get other ships in. So um, I think right now it's very difficult to predict what's going to happen in the next few days. I think one of the first things has to happen is that the insurance companies need to figure out how are we going to cover these ships. Otherwise, we will not move these ships in. So that everybody understands, under a shipping contract, once an area is declared as a war risk zone, typically the owner then passes those costs on to the charter of the ship and says, you now need to pay for the extra insurance, which is pretty pricey for those ships to go into that area. And the charter will then question whether he needs to do that or not. And so these things take time to work through. And I think at this stage, we won't know for a week or so how this is going to develop. So, as you can imagine, rates are going to really go up. in this environment
Hmm.
because we've got trap ships, we've got higher insurance, we've got uh, f- uh, attempts to find supply of crude elsewhere. So at the moment, the VLCC rate for a trip from let's say prior to the invasion, um, the VLCC rates were around $230,000 a day. They have gone up to a theoretical $500,000 a day in the space of 48 hours. And as of yet, I haven't heard any of particular fixtures being done, but clearly we've got a lot of disruption, a lot of inefficiency, a lot of vessels trapped, and so at this stage, um, owners are asking for very high rates to be able to move anywhere.
Well, I have to say, if I was an insurance company, that would be a very hard decision to make because there is no amount of money as a ship that I would take for my crew to go through there, especially since Iran is saying that they will set fire to any vessel that goes through the strait. So, what are you hearing in terms of how the crew on these ships feel and the companies that own them?
So obviously, it's a very distressing time for a lot of owners who have their crews trapped in the Persian Gulf and are in some danger, and also for owners who are potentially going into the Persian Gulf through the Straits, who will need to make sure that their crew are protected. And so there will be additional protective measures taken, perhaps even armed guards on board the ship. There may be naval convoys. There will be, again, under a shipping contract, the charter will probably have to pay an additional war risk bonus for the crew to make sure that they are heavily compensated for the additional risks that they're taking. Obviously, these ships, as we mentioned, are very expensive ships, and so the insurance companies right now are just trying to figure out how much are we going to charge for a premium to allow that ship to go into the area.
You mentioned earlier that we don't know what's going to happen next. There are different scenarios. We also don't know how long this is going to last. But what we are sure of is that obviously ships will have to start rerouting their cargo. So how is that shaping tanker demand globally?
Right. So, um, this is obviously a major hiccup in the supply of crude, particularly crude, but also in clean products in global trade. And so buyers of crude will now be looking further afield. Now, Russia has additional capacity, and we know that China will take as much possible from Russia. And the Chinese are the largest buyers in the world, so they will look to compensate some additional from Russia. But we will also see other areas of the market, let's say, benefiting from the problems in the Straits of Hormuz. So Brazil will try to push out as much as possible. uh, West Africa also, and even the United States. You will see additional crude coming out of the United States now into various areas um, because there's a need to replace it. So what that does in effect is it increases ton miles as the new supply is
Hmm.
now coming from the Atlantic Basin, and so that in effect is an injection of demand into the market. So we're going to see a lot of inefficiencies. Ships that were heading to the Persian Gulf may now be rerouted into the Atlantic, and then obviously loading and going further distances. We may see smaller type of crude carriers getting strong increases in demand, and so there's going to be a lot of operational inefficiency here and ton mile increase, and so you can expect that those freight rates are going to continue to be high.
Yes. And what about dry bulk? Is this disruption ultimately bullish or bearish for bulk freight?
So I think ultimately it's bullish. dry bulk also, because in the Straits of Hormuz we see a lot of import and export of that area. Fertilizers, around 20% of nitrogen fertilizers get moved out of that area. So we're going to see again another change in where those fertilizers are going to get supplied from. We're going to have a lot of inefficiency. Typical fertilizers get sourced from either China, Russia, Morocco, um, and other areas of the world. So we're now going to see again an increase in ton miles as fertilizer buyers, and we're entering planting and harvest seasons,
Hmm.
particularly in the US. Fertilizer prices will probably have to go up to compensate for that. And so we're going to see an increase in that. We also see quite a lot of steel imports into the area from China. Um, I think last year, uh, the Persian Gulf region imported around 17 million tons of Chinese steel, mainly on Handy and Supramax vessels. And so we're going to see a lot of disruption in these trade flows if this is prolonged. Obviously, if we have 2 or 3 weeks of quasi closure and then we have a full reopening, then things can go back to more normal. But right now, all these inefficiencies will create additional demand, and those will be bullish for dry bulk and tankers and gas carriers, because there's also a large amount of liquid natural gas which comes out of the area.
Well, that's the million-dollar question, Tom, if and when things go back to normal. Tom, thank you so much for joining us. I'm sure I'll be speaking to you very soon for more updates. And thank you to our viewers for watching. For more financial content, don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel.